Hi, this is Jeff from Evans Tuning. Today I want to talk to you about the myths that we've heard after owning and operating a Dynapack dyno for the last 12 years. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Dynapack dyno reading high. I've heard this since I've owned it 12 years ago. The dyno reads high compared to this dyno, or it's the highest reading dyno there is out there. From my point of view, the dyno is a tool. It's what I use to calibrate and tune, your car's computer. So being like any tool, has a purpose. The purpose is to hold a load, on the engine so I can properly sweep all the fuel and ignition points, in the maps and properly map out a car's, calibration or tune, whatever you want to call it. The Dynapack, when it came out, was the only game in town as far as a proper load-bearing dyno. And there's some other options on the market right now. I own two Dynapacks. I have two two-wheel drives that actually combine to make an all-wheel drive. And I have found, I've traveled and tuned at a lot of different shops. I've used multiple different dynos. I've been on the Mustang. I've been on Dyno Jets, Dyno Dynamics. You name it, I've pretty much used. From a tuning aspect, I still believe that the Dynapack has the best control strategy for being a load-bearing dyno. So as far as it reading high, I found that our dyno reads about on par with an average rated Dyno Jet. Now, when you get in the mix of a high-power car, on a roller dyno, you're limited by traction once you get up to a certain point. You might see pictures or videos of guys sitting on the trunk of a rear-wheel drive car or on the front fenders of a front-wheel drive car just so that they can get enough downforce on the tire so that it gets grip, so that it can, doesn't spin on the roller, so they're going to get some kind of a reading out of it. Once you get to that level where the tire slips, you're always questioning how much power it's actually putting out. You don't really know. And your load is changing under that kind of condition, so your tune is questionable. You may not be getting accurate load on the engine to properly tune it. Case in point, years back I had a Supra. I was making roughly about 1,000 at the wheels. At that point in time, my first dyno couldn't handle that kind of power. We ended up having to tune it on a Dyno Jet, and we made a bunch of pulls, and the car was it was spinning on the rollers. I had like 4 or 5 guys sitting on the on the trunk to make it hook, and I think it made like 860 or 880 or something like that on his Dyno Jet. I did an upgrade on my dyno years back, and that dyno now can read about 12 to 1400 horsepower, just by itself. We ended up bringing the Supra back and putting it on my dyno. Now the wheels are off, so we're connected right to the hub, so there's no wheel spin. The car put out a little bit over 1,000 on my dyno. Now you're gonna go, oh well, it reads higher. Well, of course it reads higher. The tires weren't slipping, they weren't spinning. Like everything's going right into the hub. It's able to be measured. And I found that the same condition when we ran 35 pounds of boost on that Dyno Jet, when we put it on my Dynapack, the boost changed because the load was accurate. The tune changed. I found that the tune was actually a little bit lean, where I never would have seen that or experienced that on the Dyno Jet. So it would have been missed. So that client could have left. He could have ran the car at the track, and it could have been lean, and it could have melted a piston. It could have been catastrophic. From a tuning aspect, I really strongly feel that the Dynapack, taking the wheels off the dyno, or off the car, I'm sorry, is the way to go for tuning a high-power car. Now, there's exceptions. The Dynapack can't read, 2,000 horsepower. There's limitations. Mainline actually has a new hub dyno out, which we're considering looking into down the road to do really high-power domestics. I think those can read up to 5,000 horsepower at the hub, so you can do Dyno Pro mod, which is really cool. But for a tuning tool, the Dynapack is probably one of the best out there. And it leads me into people talking about the dyno reading high. The car gets tuned on our dyno, and case in point, we're just trying to make an example here. Car baselines on our dyno at 200 horsepower. And I tune it and I make 240 horsepower. Your car is going to make 20% gain in power, whether it's on a Dynojet, whether it's on a Dynapack, whether it's on a Mustang dyno, whether it's on whatever kind of measurement you're using to calculate horsepower and torque, you're going to see that percentage gain. So you have to keep in mind, you hear people go, I had my car tuned here, and then I went it tuned here, and this guy made more power. Well, not necessarily. You need to do a baseline on that dyno to see where you're at. You need to see how much more you've gained, and you need to see the percentage gain. If you go and you get retuned by another place, and they're not willing to baseline you on the tune that you were previously tuned on by another shop, let's say, unless the conditions are unsafe or the tune's really poor and you can't, they're not willing to show you that gain. You got to kind of wonder what the dyno numbers are. You're not seeing the percentage gain. The percentage gain is the most important thing to look at when you have a car tuned. The dyno is a calibration tool. Regardless of what dyno you have, it's used to tune the car. You need to pay attention to the percentage that you gain in horsepower and torque, which won't change despite any dyno that you're on. So that's what you need to be most concerned with. So one of the other common misconceptions that we hear, on a daily basis is that the dyno's not reading the power at the wheels. So on our Dynapack, we take the wheels off. It gets put on a hub, these pods, and the wheel's removed. So at the wheels, yeah, some people consider if it's not the tire spinning on a roller, it's not at the wheels. That's completely illogical. The chassis dyno is measuring your drivetrain loss. Now, there is going to be some loss of a tire on a roller because there's friction. There's not enough friction that it's going to make a substantial difference putting the tire back on a car. I've heard this over and over and over and over again, and any dyno, whether it's hub or it's roller, is measuring your drivetrain loss. So the loss from the flywheel through the transmission, through the axles, out to the hub. Or on a real drive car, from the transmission through your drive shaft to the rear to the axles, to the hub. So either scenario, rear wheel drive or front wheel drive or all wheel drive or whatever, you're measuring the actual output through the drivetrain. It has nothing to do with the wheels. So it's at the hub or it's at the tire. It's the same thing other than maybe a tiny bit of frictional loss from the tire contacting the roller, which would be like, fraction of a percent perhaps, like, 0.25% or something, like a quarter of a percent. So it's next to nothing. So another topic that I've had people, bring up to me via email, phone call, conversations, in person in the shop. I've heard, well, my friend doesn't want to come here, told me not to get tuned on a Dynapack because the tune will be junk. I don't really know exactly what that means, but as far as the tune quality, the Dynapack lets you sweep all of the fuel and ignition load points on a map. Probably better than almost any other dyno I've been on. And that allows a tuner, not just me, but any tuner, to go in and make very detailed changes to the map and see cause and effect. I can hold the car at 3,000 RPMs and at 0 PSI, and I can see the torque and horsepower output live on the dyno screen. I can measure the difference of adding a degree of ignition timing or taking it away. I can actually tell exactly what's going on. I can find, when you're tuning ignition timing, maximum brake torque. It's where you find what's going to give you the most power, and then anything above that is actually it can lead to knock conditions, or it's not going to make any additional power, so you're running more ignition advance for no reason. But I'm able to actually see all of those things on my dyno where you're not going to be able to do that on most other style dynos. So people saying, you get tuned on a Dynapack, your tune's going to be junk, or it's not going to be good. Like, I think that comes down to operator. I think it comes down to the tuner that's tuning your car. But from an accuracy, precision standpoint, being able to see exactly what's going on, the Dynapack is, in my opinion, one of the best tuning tools that I've worked with. So the last topic I kind of want to bring up is safety. I'm sure if you go and you YouTube or you go on Google and you type in like dyno failure or like anything like that, you're gonna come up with a ton of videos or pictures of cars flying off the dyno, going through walls, going through God knows what. On a Dynapack, because you don't strap the car down as you would on a roller style dyno. We take the wheels off, car gets bolted onto the hubs, the pods slide on. Once that happens, there's nowhere for the car to go. It's going to stay in that position. There's no chance of it falling off. And owning the Dynapack for 12 years, I've never even remotely had a car come off the dyno. I don't think I've ever even thought about it happening. And I don't even ever remember hearing of a car coming off a Dynapack dyno anywhere ever. I've never even heard of it. Never seen a picture, nothing. So, from a safety standpoint of keeping, the car from flying off the dyno is non-existent on a Dynapack. The second aspect or safety kind of concern is, when you have a tire on a roller, you're spinning that tire at super, super high mile per hour. Tires have speed ratings. I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen, and I've actually had personal friends that are professional tuners, have tires explode on the dyno at high speeds. A tire blowout, if that car isn't strapped down just right, it is going off the dyno. That is unsafe, and the tire, when it explodes, it shrapnel sometimes, or it whips around, and it's going to take out whatever its path. If somebody's standing near it, if there's whatever's near it, it's going to take it out because there's a lot of force, a lot of speed, and a tire's hard and heavy. It's gonna hurt something. And the last thing that I think is crazy that people do is sitting on the cars to gain traction on a dyno. If you have someone, let's say on a front wheel drive car, sitting on the front fenders, and you have a tire blowout, that tire is probably going to take their leg off. There's going to be no way to stop it. Likewise, if you have a rear-wheel drive car and you have somebody sitting on the trunk and that car gets loosed and the straps break, all the people that are sitting on that thing are going for a ride, and someone is going to get seriously hurt. I don't ever have to think about any of this. I don't ever have to worry about it. The Dynapack, in my opinion, is the safest dyno, or hub dyno in general, because there's several other kind of hub dynos on the market. But the Dynapack is what we use, and it's never a concern, never an issue. So it's for sure, in my opinion, one of the safest, if not the safest dyno.